Hello and welcome to the video lecture on designing fields. So we have gotten to the point where we are going to talk about actually putting together the attributes. So now attributes are going to be converted into fields. As far as the database is concerned, it is the smallest unit of data in the database. Later on we're going to talk about actual storage on disk, and that's going to be a little bit different. So when we say the small unit of data in the database, that's the field. When we talk about physical storage, there's going to be other units that we talk about. So I want to make sure that that's clear before we get to other topics. So now we're going to talk about field design. Primarily when we're talking about field design, we're talking about choosing the appropriate data type for the data being stored. We're talking about coding, which is lookup tables. We'll talk about that in just a second. There's also compression and encryption. We're really not going to get into that. The compression and encryption are really beyond the scope of the course. Just understand that compression is a means of storing data efficiently on disk, so that there is no wasted disk space. And encryption, I'm sure you're probably all familiar with encryption as far as taking information and scrambling it on one end and then having to unencrypt it on the other end. That of course has performance effects, right? Because if I have to decrypt something that's encrypted, that's going to take a little bit more processing time to do. Same thing with compression. If I have compressed my data, I may need to uncompress it in order to make it useful for users. And we're going to talk about controlling data integrity in a different video, because that takes a little bit more time, and I don't want to go crazy with these videos. They're getting long enough as it is. So when we're choosing data types, we've got char and varchar. So let's think about this. So what is the difference between fixed length character, which is char, and variable length character, which is varchar? First of all, varchar can hold a lot more data. Notice the memo. You can put a large amount of data in a varchar. It's paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of characters, up to I think the upper limit's about 2,000 characters, which is a lot of characters. Char is smaller. It will not go up to 2,000. And what it means by fixed length is that if I say that a field is char 20, right? So char open parentheses 20 close parentheses when I'm defining a field, and that should be familiar from your create table statements. So that means that no matter what, on disk, I'm going to be storing 20 characters at a time. So if I store the word database, okay, database has 8 characters. If I store that in a field whose data type is char 20, I'm going to store 12 spaces padded to the right. So that's what it does. It pads to the right with spaces. So no matter what, it stores 20 characters no matter what data you're storing. Okay. First, you may look at that and say, well, that's fairly wasteful. And in some cases, you're correct. Varchar 2 is variable length, in that if I say it's a varchar 2 and I give it the full length, I say this thing can store 2,000 characters, and I decide to store the word database, it's only going to store 8 characters. If I put in paragraphs, it's going to store the paragraphs. So it's variable length. Let's take a look at what that does on disk. So, alright, this is my drawing of a disk. Sorry, I'm not the world's best artist. So we have our hard disk, right? So this is actually, just for argument's sake, this is a disk out on in your hard drive. It's broken down into sectors, and then there are going to be little tracks in here. So if we sit there and we say, all right, I'm going to store char 20, and I'm going to store the word, database. Okay, so it's going to take up a little bit of a sector. Obviously not that big, but, for all intents and purposes, let's just go with that. So that's the word database. with 12 padded spaces. Now, if I go back and I decide, oh, you know, that word database should have been plural, and I make it databases, well, all I do is I go back to the original bit of disk space that was allocated, right? Those 20 characters were allocated on disk, and I just add an S in. So one of the spaces is now just changed from a space to an S. Really no big deal. However, varchar, if I store a varchar and I store the word database, right? So it's going to be a little smaller than the other space, because now I'm only storing the 8. Other things are going to be written, right? I'm going to keep writing to this sector over and over and over again. So right after the word database, I'm going to store more data. So I'm writing data all over this sector, right? Then I decide to go back, and now I want to change database to databases. Well, now on disk, right, you have no space to put that S, because you started storing data immediately after the E in database. And again, it's not literally what's happening on disk, but let's bear with me. So what happens is, in order to store that S, I have to store that S somewhere else, like over here. So now I've got fractured data, right? So you may have defragged, right? Or this is fragmented data. So you might have you may run a defrag on your hard drive from time to time. This is what a database would need to do to put this back together. But for now, you may understand. For now, just sit there and take my word for it that, okay, so now I stored data there, right? And now in order for me to retrieve it, I've got to read. Let's see if I can change the color. How do I change the color in this? Anyway, I have to read database, and then I have to skip down to this space over here and grab the S. So it takes a little bit more time for the read-write head to actually gather up that data for me. So understand that there is a little difference, right, between setting up char and varchar, and there are pros and cons to both. So there's long, which are large numbers, right? So that's going to store very, very large numbers. We've got number, which are positive and negative numbers. We've got integers that are whole numbers, no decimal points. We've got dates, and we've got blobs with a binary large objects. And those are usually what's used for like pictures and things. So I'm going to stop there since this ran a little long, and I'm going to get into the lookup type of data in the next video.